What's up, everyone? This is Max from Amped Magazine. We're interviewing Donnie Gebert, a former U.S. veteran and recent author of A Direct Republic, The Null Hypothesis of Politics, How to Automate a Legislator. That's what we're going to be talking about in these interviews. Visit ampedmagazine.net/Donnie Gebert interview for more. Not assessing the history and as much centralization as we've had. I just found something from Robert Higgs. I'm reading his book, Crisis in Leviathan, which I absolutely loved. And he describes the logic of collective action from someone else he was reading, and how, as you know, the bigger your group gets, you're going to have other people kind of pay for your costs. And if other people are going to be doing it, then you don't have to worry about it. And, you know, if that keeps on increasing, you know, fraud and negligence just, you know, exponentially increase. So what do you think is, you know, with what you're just saying about technology kind of gapping and us not, you know, thinking about history? And I've heard you say it before, like, you know, look at we have a lot of schooling to kind of get out of our heads. Like, how do you think all of that is pushing us forward? Like, are you pessimistic about things?
No, I'm ridiculously optimistic. I'm optimistic to the point where I had to have a sanity check, and the only human being on earth could save me was Mark Zuckerberg. Okay? I have been walking around saying this for 2 years, and I have been treated literally like a heretic. Okay? Like, the arguments that were offered up against the system that I was talking about, they were all heretical. I felt like a heretic. So that was how the structure of the arguments. It was, I must not know what I'm talking about because ideology. I must not know what I'm talking about because some moralistic tendency that doesn't even function. You know what I mean? It's not even a universal principle.
I question myself too sometimes, but it's like, no, keep going with it. It's not that.
Right. So you separate the how and the why, and all of a sudden you'll realize who's talking about what. Some people are trying to solve a problem, and some people are a problem. They don't know why. They think they know why, and even if they know why, they don't know how, so they can't help. And here's where everybody gets to learn their place. There's the individual, and then there's the collective. The individual problem you have to deal with is ignorance. Okay? In any enterprise, you have to learn I'm a cog in this little machine. What am I doing? And humanity is a machine that you're in. So you have to find your own place in it, but then you have to understand that the collective mentality is about scaling, and it doesn't care about the individual. So when you talk about any enterprise, you have the individual portion of the individual business owner, and then you get to the scaling principles, which look like collectivism. Collectivism grinds an individual to death in the name of efficiency. So when a system is allowed to grind individuals to death because of inefficiency, you're going to have that because that's the system that's constructed. So the legal system right now, I would describe our legal system as conjured up in a time where it was a good idea to trick dumb people into working together because they didn't realize it was a good idea, and they probably wouldn't be convinced into it, and nobody could educate them into it. So if you can justify herding human beings into the feudal system a long time ago and under the tutelage of a benevolent English lord who would show them all how to have greater prosperity, and they're all glad for it. I'm not saying it's a good idea to force people to do something, but sometimes you got to get your kids out of bed and make them do shit. When it's another adult, you're like, okay, you probably shouldn't make the adult do that, but at a certain point, you're like, listen, are you willing to help yourself yet? We'll show you how. So think of it as benevolent help from your neighbors a long time ago. Well, then you start getting to a scale where those individual principles get ground asunder because the collectivized system has to have some kind of confines to keep everybody in the same machine. You know what I mean? Cars only work the way they work. You start dumping a bunch of different kinds of lubricant and different kinds of coolant in a car, you're going to get what I would like to call mixed results, aka a broken car. It doesn't work that way. So when you look at collectivized systems, it's not so, don't blame the person. Look at the system. There's 5,000 people all working in the same system, but not one of them understands all of the components. If that happens, you can get a wobble in that system. The CEO doesn't know what 400 people out of this 5,000 are doing. Somebody else is supposed to be watching them. They are inept. There's not corruption. They are inept. That business will start to have a wobble. It could be financial, it could be productive, but it'll start to have a wobble. If it's fraudulent, that wobble will appear to be minimal until it breaks. It'll get real hard out of hand because it was fraud, and then all of a sudden you realize all the money's gone. So the systems versus the people. When you're worried about who's caught up in what, it's moralistic, it's judgmental. When you're, how did this happen? It was, this step was not performed properly by the operator. The operator died, so we don't have to blame them. And then it was self-contained. So the operator killed himself and broke our equipment. So now we get to replace the equipment and operator's dead. So what happens when the operator is the problem? You still end up cleaning up the mess. This is society, whether you like it or not. So we have to be able to look around and say, what's the best way we can organize, educate, and not have systems that wobble? And when they self-assemble and when they blow up in your own face, then the wobbles should fix themselves much faster because people figure the stuff out faster. That's kind of where I come at the whole thing.
Where do you think like the wobble was for like historical events like World War I or Vietnam or stuff like that?
So you have to look at, so here's why before, let's just say, before World War I, global communications were a real rare thing. Like the British Empire had the ability to communicate, but not like super well. They did. Their communications, the British Empire's ability to master the seas and communicate via that way and do commerce that way made them very powerful for a long time because somebody knew what they were doing. So then as you start looking at how do civilizations ever get that power, they know how. That's it. People say knowledge is power. That's it. They know how. So you go back in history, you start looking at anything you want. You look at a strategic reason, and you have a bunch of people who don't have the right information to make that decision. And in many cases, they were very, very, very good at their job. And they would come up with at least a ballpark solution for something. We're not talking about wars and violence or anything, just a strategic solution that goes over, it takes a lot of ships. It takes a lot of ships just to run communications back and forth. The British East India Company didn't really operate with legal immunity for their actions. They operated with cannons on their goddamn ships because sometimes they had to just fight their way out. There are people who will try to take our stuff on the high seas. We have cannons. There is no 911. We are 911. So a lot of people forget that there's places on Earth where there's no 911, and a lot of normal people have just taken on this societal ethic of it's someone else's job to do certain things in society, all the way down to protection. And this puts a serious mental wobble in everybody because they don't even know what to expect from their cops anymore. And now that they're starting to complain, mostly because they're seeing it, the system hid the horrors of cops for a long time. Now everybody's seeing it because camera phones, not because the systems of 40, 50, 100 years ago were good. And we're seeing that wobble. One court case at a time, one death at a time. There's cameras in Jeffrey Epstein's prison, right? You know why? Because somebody died in that prison. They said, why the fuck aren't there cameras in there? So, okay, everybody gets a free pass this round, campers, and we'll put cameras in and nobody goes to jail. And the next time somebody dies in there and there's cameras, somebody's going to jail, right? Well, every time we find that the public servants have found a way to make themselves immune from mistakes that look like dead people. So again, it's a lot of this is systemic fraud, and you have to know your place in it. Plus, you have to understand scaling. Scaling is what you and I would kind of call collectivism. And when you put an ideological component to collectivism, you get to talk to people about how they feel about systems they don't understand, and then they get to vote to control them, even though it doesn't work like that, and everybody's going broke. So
yeah, I think
that's how it works.
Yeah.
That's why socialism is bad.
Yeah, I'm in the part of Crisis of the Leviathan now where he's describing language and how it can be used by these like intellectuals, the Marxists or whoever the ideological person is spouting, their ideas and stuff, and how they're using language like inflammatory language, big descriptions, like, and just describing how that it gets people to understand it, and they're like, oh well, there you go, that's something I can cling on to, and that's as far as they go, and this is the discussions we end up having, and people feel good about like that they're in a little bubble now that they understand their position, I guess, or it's too, like I always say too, it's it's a lot to think about, and it's a lot to digest, and you need to put your time in to really understand it all, and it's no wonder people just justify just kind of not even voting, or not even like paying attention to politics, like the Ron Paul says, like the apathetic always come to him eventually, but yeah, just the apathy of it all, it's kind of astounding, and I think it's because there's, I don't want to call them necessarily bad people, but maybe they are, that they use ideology and they don't drill down to the root causes like this, and they just convince themselves that's the way to go with things, and so I mean, like,
if you have to seize the means of production, you don't know how to procure it for yourself.
That's a good point. That's a very good point, and it's always
think about where that phrase came from, right? Think about that part of the world. You had a lot of farmers, Russians are smart, right? So these are people who understood that there were people who had means, and it was because it's not that the humans in the field were unproductive, it's that the other humans had means, and they were living a higher standard of living, and they could attack them because they knew how to do stuff. So now you get these memes way back when, seizing the means of production. Okay, so it's not that we're lazy, it's not that we're stupid, it's that we don't have what you have. So if we take it, we'll be able to do the same as you. And that's somewhat correct, except if you don't know how to procure that shit, you probably don't understand the full business cycle. So the communists take over and wobbles it to death, 50, 60, 70 years later.
I think that's what Dostoevsky was writing about. But it sounds like you're saying, like, the political leaders know how to, and for a very long time, they know how to procure the authoritarian nature of it all, and make it seem like they're relevant.
That's easy. Exploiting hungry people with food is easy.
Yeah, I think that's what I say about the politicians. What Socrates said, like, politicians are going to be the candy shop owners, and they're always going to sell you like the candy and not really worry about your long-term health, and it's all just a farce, or can become a farce.
Well, again, I'm going all the way back to politics is chicanery because of unaccountability. All the way back to the beginning of time. There's people trying to organize, and anytime people are trying to organize, you're going to have an opportunity to latch onto an enterprise and have a no-show job, okay? The unions know this, the mafia knows this. Now everybody needs to learn the racket of the no-show job. Bernie Sanders has a show job. Okay? He shows up. He doesn't do a whole hell of a lot, but he has a show job. And he's, okay, so now we're going to give him credit. He organizes. Okay, I understand he's an organizer. He's not very good at it. And he requires massive amounts of your funds to do so. And then it very, very, very much appears that he's fraudulent. Okay? You know, how does a socialist get 3 houses? The punchline for that one is the awkward silence at the end. Okay? That's what the punchline is. How does a socialist get 3 houses? Because he's a shitty socialist. That's how he is. It's really.
But he's going to seize the means of production and give it to all the workers, and everyone's going to be fair and equal. And
never mind production. Bernie will not use the word seize, but it'll sound a lot like reallocate.
Right.
Hey, you want to get into some fuckery? Welcome to Neurolinguistics. Some people, if you listen to the way a lot of stuff comes, a lot of the way, you know, it's our primate brain absorbing information. There's the words that we're using, which have one or more definitions, but then there's the tonality. The Native American would not use tone. They would speak to you like this. They were probably very educated, and they knew how to fuck with people with their voices. Don't take that tone with me, white man. I know what the fuck you're up to. That would be a, well, guess what? When you keep the whole audience in their chairs like they're a bunch of children, and you talk to them as if we're going to explain all the mysteries of the universe, but then we bring up a bunch of irrelevant details that don't really mean a whole lot, then we're going to get into the part that requires action, and we're going to stick it into them a little bit. And just when they feel like they need to do something, I'm going to point them at a voting booth, and they don't know how any of this shit works anyway. Dumb fucks. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the Bernie trick. There it is. He's making people sound good.
Yeah. It's quite amazing to me because I worked for a Congress lady like maybe for 3 months before her election, and that's where I really started getting into this and really started seeing just like the pathological nature of all this. And there was this girl in there that was working for. She was like she said she was the head campaign manager, but then no one else thought that. So there was like 3 campaign managers for this Congress lady, and they were all infighting about it. But this lady finally decided that, you know, she's had enough, and she's going to start fighting back against this lady she's working for to, you know, become a Congress lady. She's already worked into primary here in 2 years, and getting to know her a bit, she went to school for political science and acting, and and I hear that all the time. Like Andrew Heaton.
She had one major.
What?
So she had one major.
Yeah. Yeah, right. They probably have to, you know, do it together. They have the same prerequisites. But yeah, I hear like Andrew Heaton had a podcast. He's a really funny comedian. He does like a political thing, and he worked for Congress lady too. And he said that he would always date these theater majors, and he lived in D.C. all this time. And it was just like, when I heard that, I was just like, I wonder how many theater majors are actually living in D.C. and like how like they must trade tips, and you know, it must be why they're so good on television and in front of people. They're just like they should be in movies. They're such good actors.
Well, here's the thing. I was military intelligence. I was senior, middle manager, depending upon who wants to call what senior leadership. I was senior leadership, at least in the position of when I spoke to my boss, it was on that level. And I cannot tell you, like if you go every part of the military, go ask an Army medic, what are the signs and symptoms of shock? What are the signs and symptoms of a gunshot wound? What are the signs and symptoms of, a head wound, head injury? What are the signs and symptoms of psychological warfare? Nobody seems to know the answer. And I got a strange feeling that it comes back all the way back to neurolinguistics. And 1,000 years ago, I think the ability to use words that would confuse people and hit them with a tonality that they found familiar, I think they called it white magic. And instead of being lied to, you were enchanted. Mm. But either way, it's still a big bunch of bullshit. But when children are trying to manipulate you, they use the tone. Right. When politicians talk about climate change, they take the tone out of it and they speak of it as if it's fact. And then when they speak about it any other way, they want you emotionally involved in that one point, right? Mm-hmm. Listen to the way Tulsi Gabbard speaks about climate change. The whole thing is a foregone conclusion if you listen to her tone. Mm-hmm. But all of her words are talking about things that have to happen in the future. So I'm almost certain she knows this trick.
Yeah.
Maybe she's just like, I mean, listen, at a certain point, people just don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're pleading like a child before they go to bed.
Yeah. I just, like, with the nature of all this, there's been so many people like her and so many politicians. I just feel like, you know, like if there's someone like you or me or someone that is in their face and gives them something that just like chokes them up. Like I feel like if I was in that position, like I feel like I'm a very honest person. I would have a hard time lying, but I feel like if you said something like really got them, like they would just show it all and show their hands, but it doesn't happen. And that surprises me so much that they're just able to deflect and, you know, then immediately turn it around. And it's talented, but it definitely amazes me that, you know, it's in the name of righteousness and you know, the greatness of our country and the protection of our children and for the future. It's you know, it's really kind of crazy to me that people can do that.
What's the difference between deception and perception? You get down to it. If you are misperceiving at all, you are deceived. That is the nature of misperception. All warfare is based on deception. So most self-destructive behavior is people misperceiving shit. That's how it works. It's not taking it personal. So a lot of people are soft. We were talking about this before. People are soft as hell. And because they're soft, at a certain point, the argument becomes exhausting and they get frustrated. It becomes personal because they have an anecdote that they think the macro system is supposed to bend to their will because they know this tragic anecdote. Let me give you an example. If a mass shooting is a 1 in 100 million event, we will have 3 every year and 4 on leap year. Okay? Because that's how many people live here. The end. We will have 3 mass shootings a year if it's 1 in 100 million. And lo and behold, the average is over time, not so much more than that.
Right.
So what is the deal? Why is that happening? It's happening because every once in a while we have a crazy person on such a ridiculous event that the only way you can turn it into, and I quote, a national conversation is if you show all 3 of them to all 300 million people and then tell them it's coming to a Walmart near them.
Right.
So at a certain point, the voter is a dickhead. And I want the voter to be not that. The voter needs to be informed and working in a system that they don't have to fund and in a system that isn't filled with chicanery. So they only fund it if it's not chicanery. And if it's chicanery, they get what they get.